It's a pleasure to have on the show educational psychologist Warwick Dodge joining us now. Warwick, good to have you with us. Why don't these work anymore? I thought this is what everyone was using. This is the de facto way of distracting your child in spur, isn't it? Isn't this what you...
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's become the de facto way of distracting your child rather than engaging in constructive play activities with them. Constructive play versus getting them to be babysat by an electronic device are two completely different things.
Before I think we unpack why it's good for certain ages and not good for certain ages, when we talk about early childhood development, what is that time frame we're talking? Are we talking newborn till 2 years? Take me through that.
We're generally talking about the first 1,000 days, which is known in the research and the literature as the sort of the critical period in which brain development, language development, and a lot of cognitive development takes place that will set the child up for success in later life.
So it's the first 3 years?
Basically the first.
So why are parents getting this so wrong? Is it just too easy to distract your child while you're busy checking Instagram and YouTube and heavens knows what else? Are parents lazy?
Inherently, yes. I think that there's an element of perhaps laziness about it. It's convenience. It's not laziness, it's convenient. There's flashing lights, there's beeping noises, and it keeps the child occupied. And it means that mum can now sit and keep herself occupied with her electronic device.
Why is that bad, though? What's the problem with flashing lights and keeping children occupied? Isn't that what you want?
Ideally, one wants to keep children occupied with an adult. You know, the object is not to buy something that our children can play with, but something that we can play with our children. Okay. Play is essential in developing neural pathways for fine motor development, language development, the whole idea of serve and return conversations, you know, I speak, you speak.
Is that engagement?
And that's engagement. Simply giving a child an electronic device is not engaging with them. And the electronic device cannot take the place of a caregiver or a parent.
So you're not saying don't ever give your child an iPad or a tablet. It's just not recommended that early in development. By all means later in life? Or is that also not a good idea?
Look, I think we have to accept that technology is a reality in our lives and that children are going to want to play with and want to use electronic equipment. It's a matter of balance. The social learning theorists talk about the zone of proximal development, which is where a child's abilities are slightly exceeded by the activity that they are playing. And that is then scaffolded by the parents and supported by the caregiver in order to carry them through to the next level. Just by giving a child an electronic device, it does away with that scaffolding. It does away with that support. And you can give a child a brick and some clay, but he's not going to learn to build a house. You need an adult or an engaged caregiver there to actually support them through that learning process.
So when it now comes to parents trying to find more effective ways to keep their kids entertained, I asked the question, I know a few people going into December holidays now who are trying to find ways to keep their kids entertained, whether it's going out to theme parks or movies. These start getting expensive. Do you understand at least, Warwick, where a parent might want to revert to something as easy, as simple as an iPad? Someone watching this evening, are iPads and tablets and cell phones of any use at all to a younger child? Or are you saying, forget it, don't use it, put them in the cupboard?
Not at all.
Okay.
They have value. If you can engage, however, with your child on the iPad. So the secret is to engage with the child. If they're using the iPad, let them use the iPad, but be engaged with them. So there's a joint story building, there's joint problem solving, there's joint pretend play around the characters on the iPad.
Yeah.
But to simply let the iPad take the place of the parent, that becomes problematic.
So someone watching this right now, I think younger parents, with respect, I'm not a father, I don't know, and I'm sure it's very difficult for a parent who's working at least a full-time job, possibly on weekends, maybe a single parent who's working a second job as well. Give them some practical advice, some free advice, if you may, to try and keep their kids entertained, but still from an educational perspective without trying to take too much time away from themselves, because they've got jobs to fulfill, they've got money to make, they've got to provide for this child, and now you're asking them to entertain them.
And children are not the cheapest hobby.
No, they're not. No. I have friends who have kids. I can vouch for that.
Quality over quantity is the important thing. Rather spend half an hour of quality time with your child than 3 hours in the same room doing nothing. When you engage, remember that when you're invited into a child's world of play, you are the visitor there. So play by their rules. If cows can fly, let cows fly.
Can't they fly? I thought they could fly.
Of course they can. In a child's world, anything can do anything. The problem as adults is we often say, no, that's not right. No, the sky isn't pink. Why not? No, cows can't fly. Well, if a cow wants to fly in the child's world of play, let it fly. So we need to give ourselves over and be a child ourselves to some extent. And it doesn't have to be all day, every day. It's quality versus quantity.
Just before we start saying goodbye to you, Warwick, and I hope to have you back on the show again as we head into December when it comes to the buying of toys. That's going to be very important. We'll have that discussion later. When it now comes to someone watching you and I discussing this at the moment, are you suggesting that perhaps it's time to get outside again? It's so easy to plug in the PlayStation or the... Is it called an Xbox? I think it's called an Xbox. And the iPad. It's just too easy for parents to keep their kids entertained now. Are you saying go buy a soccer ball, go buy a Barbie doll? I'm not putting children into gender roles, but I'm saying get out with a soccer ball, get out with a pool noodle, and actually spend some time with your kids in the sun. Is that ultimately what you're asking for?
That's part of it.
Okay.
If you can engage children in activities which engage them in physical activity, gross motor coordination, swinging from monkey bars, sliding down slides, playing with mud and making mud pies together. Perfect. It doesn't exclude the electronic devices, but make sure that you get the balance right.
Very briefly, and I do need to wrap this up, are you seeing any evidence, Warwick, in the past couple of years, since these devices have become far more mainstream, that there's a detrimental effect on the development of children? Yes, it's a good idea to get out with a soccer ball, but are we seeing any problems with using something like this for a child?
One of the problems we're faced with, Gareth, is that the iPad is a relatively new invention. It's been around for 10 years. We don't have massive scientific data on the possible consequences of long-term extended exposure to electronic devices on children who are very young. You know, there are currently longitudinal studies that are happening. But at the moment, science is playing catch-up to technology. And there's the potential that it could have detrimental effect in the future.
Okay, so right now it's a balance, is really what you're saying.
Balance is what it's all about.
Warwick, thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Educational psychologist Warwick Dodge joining us here on Newsnight.